New Gods of Remnant by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 5, Reasons to Conquer. It's fine now. You're going to be alright. Why? Because I am here. Times move ever onward. Reasons to conquer. Time passed as all things inevitably do. Almost before Naruto knew it, 3 days elapsed, then 3 weeks, followed by 3 months. He wasn't even sure when or where they passed him by. Only that they did. It hit him with the first snowfall of the season. Fall had ceded the throne, and now winter reigned in its place. Just like that, someone snapped their fingers, and now winter reigned. And now he found himself worrying for the colder months, wondering how the days had gotten away from him. Time gets funny when you have 2 fronts to look after. Speaking of which, yay! Summer's heel snapped down at the back of his head in a blur of white. Naruto didn't look up from the crude wooden table he directed, nor the bloody rabbit he was skinning atop it. There was no need. Kurama reacted long before he could. A golden arm of translucent chakra burst from his back, caught the startled girl by the ankle, and whipped her down into the ground. Aura crackled surly against the impact, but otherwise held. So too did the giant limb, now pushing Summer's cheek into the mud. A soft squeak of anger swelled in his ears, drawing a chuckle from him. Good form, the blonde hummed, not looking away from their next meal. I almost didn't hear you coming that time. Silver Eyes glowered up at him in defiance of her defeat. That's not fair. You cheated. Ah, she's adorable. Oh, cleaning his hands on a nearby cloth, he set his knife beside their catch and turned to face her. And how, pray tell, did I do that? 3 months in the countryside had softened him to Summer's presence, helping him to ease into his newfound role as her guardian, made her downright easy to banter with. A ninja uses all tools at his disposal. When she only scowled at him, he felt the strange need to impart another lesson to her. In a real fight, your opponent isn't going to stand still. Did you think I would? She wrinkled her nose at him. I don't know, you cheater. Laughter bubbled past his lips. Never changed, Summer. Who's changing now? Naruto turned and let the poor girl scrabble to her feet as Maria strode back into the camp with her prize. Mama! The young woman sputtered and slapped her recently repaired mask down to hide her face. Stop calling me that, damn it! Tuck peeked over the Reaper's shoulder with a yawn, safely secured against her back by a faded leather harness. At a glance, it might seem demeaning, but really it was the best way to keep track of the poor thing when taking her on a hunt. Whatever had been done to her, she was not the same assassin he'd faced that day. She was shy, quiet, timid. If she was alone for more than 5 minutes, she'd start crying. The old talk was dead. This was someone new, telling that to Summer, even after what she'd said. Well, easier said than done. Why couldn't she see that? Silver Eyes narrowed past him. Got anything for dinner? Brace of quinoas and a deer. He grinned at the unspoken challenge. You, a mighty bear carcass thumped down at his feet with an audible thud. Now it was Naruto's turn to cry foul. Well, he muttered, that's not fair at all. Stuff it and help me with this harness, will you? Kiddo's tired. Nuh-uh. Another jaw-popping yawn answered. Not tired. I'm a big girl. And now they knew one another well enough to switch roles seamlessly. Naruto distracted Summer with a quick shadow clone, leaving Maria free to slip one arm free from her harness. He helped quickly, and in a matter of moments, they had a younger girl free and away from those angry Silver Eyes. He knew she was close to forgiving talk, but he wasn't about to push his luck. Best to avoid the matter entirely for now. Naruto hummed softly as he took the girl in his arms and began to rock her back and forth. Sure you aren't. Let's just have a nap before dinner, yeah? She turned and buried her head into his chest. Okay. You were right. There was a stream nearby. Maria sat on a nearby log and indicated a pair of full water skins at her belt as she went. We'll have plenty to drink on the way back. Naruto nodded them, careful to keep his voice low. Good. There should be enough to see us to well at least. Maria mumbled. Can't say I'm looking forward to it. They'd avoided the main city for 3 months at her request and made all the difference for it. Wandering the wildlands had its benefits, and he'd like to think they had done some good out here. Saved a few people, lent their aid to the occasional village, even hunted down a few contracts on wayward bandits. They weren't hurting for money, not anymore. Today would be the last day of it. Ville was warm most of the time, but the winter season was not to be trifled with. You couldn't stay out here in the cold. You'd freeze. They'd need to find a place to stay, somewhere that wasn't a village, which meant the city. Ugh, civilization. There was a time when he'd pine for it, but he'd rather enjoy their little group. I have a place in the upper city, she informed him suddenly. You're free to crash there if you like it. A blonde brow rose, both in abject relief and mild confusion. That's great, but why you didn't tell me this before? Don't like it, she muttered, tucking her knees into her chest. Too big, feels empty by myself. Butler looks after the house. Butler? Just like that, a thorn of intrigue pricked at Naruto's heart. Wait, just how big is this place? Most houses don't need a butler. She looked away, digging one finger into her cheek. Not very big. His brow furrowed, sensing a lie. Maria. She buried her head into her knees and made a keen noise through her teeth that sounded rather close to a whine. It was an only adorable sound coming from a woman who could cut through an army of Grimm almost single-handedly. Seemed everyone had different sides to them. Maria was no exception. A lonely silver-eyed peeked up at him when he didn't look away. Her resolve crumbled. All right, she flung up her arms with a hiss. You've got me. It's a mansion. I'm loaded, all right? The Calavera name's a big deal in Vale. Blame my mother for that. You didn't have to keep this from us, you know. I'm sorry, she muttered. Didn't want you to think less of me. Silly. He flicked her forehead and on a whim reached out to lay his hands over hers. Why would I? This from the hotshot who goes around helping people and acting like a damn superhero? Naruto grinned despite his better judgment. Your accent's showing again. Bah! She clamped up with a glower. Your stupid showing again. A moment of silence pushed between them. They broke it with laughter. Maria was, well, not rude per se, but Naruto found she had a sharp tongue all the same, even if she did make an effort to blunt it when Summer and Talk were around. Here was someone used to living alone on the open road, not the company of others. Still, she was coming around slowly but surely. He'd earned her curiosity for heeding her awe for standing up to the specter of Salem, then her respect for taking care of Summer and Talk. She could have left them at any time. Instead, she'd chosen to stay. He had an inkling as to why, but he daren't voice it. If she wanted to stick around for a bit, then he wasn't going to turn her down. You're not alone anymore, his thoughts betrayed him suddenly. You know that, right? Maria's gaze strayed to Talk, sound asleep in his arms back to him. So her eyes rose to meet his. Suppose you're right. In the waning light of the sun, her face almost seemed to glow. She'd been acting rather strange of late. There was times when he felt her eyes on him as he moved about the camp, not stalking, just watching. He wasn't sure what he felt for her. There was certainly something there, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Her hand touched his, dark fingers threading with his own. Naruto, I wanted to say, Papa, stop flirting with Mama and pay attention to me. Summer bowled between the two of them before anything could come of it. I'm bored and the shadow clump popped. Gods above. Maria turned incandescent and jerked her hand away. I swear I'll never get used to that. Talk yawned in Naruto's arms. Used to what? Summer scowled at her. Nothing. Maria wasn't having it. You can't ignore her forever, you know. The Grim Reaper smiled softly. I think she's sweet on you. She sees you as her big sister, you know. Naruto continued to rock the smaller girl in his arms, soothing her back to sleep. Summer looked to Talk like a snake. I still don't forgive her. Pity pocketed Naruto in what passed for his heart these days. All right. Maybe he should interfere just a little. He nudged to Talk with his elbow, preventing her from drifting off to dreamland just yet. Sure enough, the girl stirred and flopped over in his arms to regard Summer with her blearing eyes. Too small, too pure, must protect. He wasn't even the recipient of that thousand-yard stare, and he already felt himself faltering. Sis. She lipped the words. What did I do? Summer folded like a house of cards. Forget it. I give up. Naruto opened his mouth to offer more encouragement, only to choke. A crushing headache silenced him. It came out of nowhere, a sudden and sharp spike of negativity so powerful that it nearly knocked him off his feet. Pain, death, misery, despair, death, agony like he'd never known, bringing with them a wave of suffering so strong he nearly lost his lunch. Gah! Kerma hissed. What the hell is that? He knew the answer, of course. They both did. They both felt a great disturbance, as if dozens of voices suddenly cried out in terror and or silenced. Maria swore a blue streak, and Naruto turned, following her gaze, already knowing what he would find there. His sixth sense shrieked a warning. There was a plume of smoke on the horizon, barely visible over the treetops in the dying light. Naruto stood, even as he pushed Talk into her arms, felt his tenses shrieking. He staggered into a dead sprint, already knowing the cause, already knowing he'd be too late to save everyone, but desperate to all the same. Trees crashed before his vision. Naruto ran faster. Someone screamed way ahead of him. Their cry became a raspy gurgle. He burst through the forest and ran into a hurricane of black, and as the howl of yet more grim ripped through the night. Bandits were a nuisance. They were the bane of travelers everywhere. Feared, hated, and loathed vagabonds and wanderers, miscreants who lived for themselves and no other. They were a plague upon the land, vicious souls who cared not for their fellow man, weaklings who banded together to rip and tear, pillage and raid, reave and destroy. You couldn't talk to them, couldn't reason with them. You could only avoid them, stick to the roads, hire powerful guards, and hope and pray that such preparations would be enough. Once the Brahmin tribe was bound to the same creed. No longer. Sasuke had seen to that. 3 months. That was the sacrifice he made. That was sacrifice he made for these sorry thoughts. Those to legitimize them. They needed to change. To change them, their depravity had to be culled. Words were not enough. He required their loyalty, and if he couldn't have that, their fear would do. Every single deserter had put to the sword, and the real monster of the tribe. Well, they suffered a special fate. The rapists were incinerated, the murderers beheaded, the thieves disarmed, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, evil for evil. Only one manslayer had been spared, and only then, because he proved his usefulness. Those that remained, those who trained, those he now marched the tribe up to the very gates of Mistral itself. It was hardly an army. He knew better than to bring the full might of the tribe to their doorstep. No doubt they'd make it as an act of war. If they did, then there would be no reasoning with the lot of them. 20 good men, likely armed and armored. That was all he would need for this. There's some iron to be had there. Naruto always liked using numbers. He'd take a page from his book, just this once. Are we there yet? Soon. His mouth quirked in a small smile. The hour was late, the sun cutting an angry line of fire across the sky as it set, barely a cloud. For now, that would come later if negotiations failed. Raven walked beside him, yet ahead of the rest, determined not to be left behind. Even then, her little legs struggled to keep up, boots sucking against the mud. Crow was only moderately more fortunate than her in that regard, for reasons Sasuke couldn't fathom. The boy had taken it into his head to ride on his back. His half-hearted attempt to dislodge them had proven futile. He'd let him stay for the time being. Others proved more restless. Never thought I'd see the day we visited Haven. A low, drawling voice laughed behind him. You're a ballsy one, Uchiha. That are cracked. Haven't decided yet. Sasuke stifled a sigh. That's none of your concern, Sukuna. I already promised you your fill of fighting. If this plan went south, leave it. I gathered that already. More laughter. You're a really mysterious bastard. Are gods always this broody, or is it just you? A lone Rinnegan eye peered over his left shoulder to regard his second in command with a baleful glare. All right, the madman withdrew with raised hands. I didn't mean it, just having a bit of fun. Sukuna was a heavily tattooed man, clad in a flowing white robe with a black scarf, barren salmon-colored hair, bright scarlet eyes, and an insufferable laugh bordering on outright arrogance. Even now, mere minutes from what seemed for what some called bordering on, for what some called their doom, a smile was never far from his face. Bastard always seemed amused about something he'd heard watching. He'd bear watching. Ambition was well and good, but this man was still a killer through and through. From what little Raven and Crow had told him, this man had been with the tribe for some time, with strength just as his. This monster was masquerading as a man. As a man could have taken the Bronwyn tribe for himself long ago, for reasons he couldn't understand, as Sukuna hadn't. Instead, he'd abstained, opting to follow the last leader until his death, making himself known to Sasuke only after the fact. That distinction alone meant he had a better head on his shoulders than most. He had proved useful. More than that, the men and women of the tribe liked the snarky bastard. Killing him would bring unwanted problems, and so he lived. For now, nothing more. Sasuke refused to trust him any further than that. He would never lower his guard, not while this man was nearby. Take your fun elsewhere. Make sure the men are ready. A jaw-popping yawn answered. Fine. Crow shivered on his back as the killer retreated. Guy gives me the creeps. He wasn't alone. Why are we doing this? Raven asked, steering his thoughts away from the dark places. He wasn't alone. Why are we doing this? Raven asked, steering his thoughts away from a dark place. Because I wish to meet these huntsmen. Sasuke didn't break his stride, forcing her to jog just to keep pace with him. They're pivotal for what I have planned. His ward scuffed one boot against the ground like the petulant child she was. You're a god. Don't need no stinking huntsman. Language. Sasuke tapped her forehead with two fingers in a gesture reminiscent of his brother. And speak properly. Fine. Crow perked up from his perch before Raven could speak. Why do we need these huntsmen? They were learning. Good. There was hope for these two who held the power in these lands. Grim. No, they were mindless beasts. The people? Close, but not quite. The answer was obvious. Huntsmen. No shinobi these. They were all flash and style, bold and brash warriors meant to be seen and heard, a beacon for the people, hoped to help ward away negative emotions and the grim with them. The concept reminded him of the elemental nations, but fragmented. Each nation had its own villages and warriors within, and so too did each of the four kingdoms, and yet somehow the grim ruled. Why, this realm was a mess, lost, thrown into disarray. This was not his world, and if you wanted his tribe to be anything more than it was now, he would have to treat with those who lived in this world, subjugate them. If that failed, they would learn that his word was his bond, and he was not a man to be crossed. And perhaps as his name spread across this strange new land, he would draw attention to himself. Perhaps then he would find the others, or they would find him. It was a comforting thought, but for now there was work to be done. He could have told him his plan. He chose not to. After all, part of his plan hinged on their reaction to today's events. All will become clear, he said instead. Raven and Crow sulked. I'll read you both a story when we get back. Raven's eyes flashed with triumph. How are we going to get your attention then? Sasuke allowed himself to smile. Clever girl. Like this, with a deep breath, the last Uchiha gathered chakra in his lungs, kneaded it, molded it, released it. Cries went up from Mistral's walls as a great fireball howled into the sky, obliterating a nearby cloud before hurtling on into the upper atmosphere, casting wild shadows as it went. All too easy, barely even a tug on his reserves. He had not been idle these last 3 months. He could easily fire off that jutsu dozens of times and still have energy to spare. Chakra exhaustion? No, thank you. Crow grinned up at the sight. I want that. Raven laughed and pushed up against his leg. No fair, me too. Sasuke patted both of their heads. Stick with me and you'll have everything. Turning away from them, he raised his gaze towards the gates. Even from this distance, his keen eyes told him much. He saw the soldiers scurrying about the wall like ants, hastening to and fro to convey what they'd seen lurking below. All well and good, but still not the reaction he wanted. His plan wouldn't work if the city closed its gates and hid within its shell like a frightened turtle. Mistral! Charcoal flowed into his lungs again, not with fire but power, amplifying his voice tenfold. I would treat with your warriors, send out the leader of your academy. And if we refuse, a faint voice shouted back. Another fireball howled into the sky, far larger than the last one. The owner of said voice screamed like a little girl and ran to find his superiors. Not 5 minutes later, the gates of Mistral opened, not to admit an army as he suspected, but a single being. They all slammed shut behind her. Curious, the headmaster of Haven Academy was woman in this era. He bore her no ill will, of course. Anyone capable of commanding a city through presence alone was a warrior to respect and feared. He wouldn't be able to face her with someone clinging onto him. Crow, he muttered, a nervous gulp. Yeah, Pops. Sasuke rolled his shoulders. Get off. The boy took one look at his expression and clambered off his back. Raven saw it too and skittered back. Still, the woman approached. Closest. She paused a stone's throw away and tilted her head to regard him. My. When she finally spoke, her voice was rich and indulgent, like smoke rolling through honey. And here I was wondering who dared to knock on my gate. You've certainly made quite the ruckus, haven't you? Fierce red eyes blazed into his even across the distance, framed by a thin smile alongside a dark veil and lustrous violet hair. Leather armor clad her body, hinting at the curves beneath, teasing the eye. A single blood-red spear lay clenched in her right hand. Another lay bound to her back by a dark cord of some kind. He couldn't take his eyes off her either. There was something wrong with those weapons. They were wrong, twisted, clean, yet dripped with blood, as if they were cursed. Well, she planted one hand on her hip as she regarded him. You asked for me, Bandit King. Here I am. You are trespassing on sacred ground. I would have your name before I kill you. Uchiha Sasuke, he gave it gladly. Are you the strongest here? Her smile grew. Without a doubt. And you are. My name would mean nothing to one such as you, for I have forsaken it in service to a greater good. She tossed her hair to one side, concealing a crimson iris even as the other lanced into him. I am the headmistress of Haven Academy, even as the other lanced into him. Academy, maiden of spring, that is all. Her smile turned cold, crimson flames burning from her eyes. This is my land, these are my people, and thus they are under my protection. You will not enter the vault, nor its price within. State your business and leave. If you do not, you will die. Bold of her to assume his intentions. Also, vault, relic, what were those? I think not. Dismissing such thoughts, he extended his right hand in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. I didn't come here to shed blood. I came here to forge an alliance. Ha! A peal of delighted laughter burst from her lips. An alliance? Spare me your lies. A bandit will always be a bandit. Your kind has ever been a plague upon our lands. Why change now? You misunderstand. Sasuke retracted his palm, smile slipping into a scowl. I am not asking you for peace. I am telling you what will be. The Bronwyn tribe. He turned his head aside and spat. Their days of terrorizing the people are over. That same hand slashed to the air before she could counter him. They are mine now. They follow my teachings, my ways. Now we seek to show the world what true strength is. And what is true strength? The headmistress challenged. A lone finger rose, damning her with but a gesture. She scowled at it. Strength of will, strength of spirit, strength you and your huntsmen do not possess. He felt no arrogance at all in those words. They were the truth after all. He gained nothing from lying. After all, this world is in chaos and needs order. I am here to provide that order. Around him, the air began to stir. You ask us to trust you, yet you speak of revolution and bring your vanguard to our doorstep. Heaven's headmaster regarded him weirdly. Why should we form a pact with you? A reason to trust me? Sasuke blinked. Was that all? Easily remedied. Perhaps a demonstration is in order. His eyes pulsed, and violet flames bloomed around him as a blazing giant took shape, responding to his will. It loomed over the academy, largest still it grew, even as mighty wings bloomed from its back to blot out the sun. Those behind the walls cried out, men, women, and children alike. I take it back, Raven whispered from the safety of his legs. I want that. The crow drove an elbow into his sister's side and missed for it, unable to look away for such a sight. Away behind him, Sukuna obviously cackled. Ha! Just listen to them. Now that's fear. This'll be a massacre. And this is the gift I offer you. Sasuke moved his arms, and Susanoo moved with him, mimicking his every motion. The power to crush any enemy before you, to forge new grounds and keep it, to colonize as far as the eye can see. Power unrivaled, might unsurpassed. I give you the future. The headmistress blinked. Once, twice, thrice. Her confidence was nowhere to be seen now, replaced by something dangerously akin to awe. Sasuke wasn't sure he liked it. Susanoo might be an exception to the norm, but surely the huntsmen of Remnant were not so foolish as to think him a god. Any true Uchiha could do this. Given time and training, it was only logical. There was just no way this deadly woman would possibly think of him as anything more than the god of darkness. Sasuke's head whipped towards her. What was that? No, nothing. A small, bemused smile bloomed upon her pale face. Perhaps there might be some merit to an alliance. After all, hips swinging, she sauntered forward. Sasuke kept his eyes on her. Earlier you asked my name, and did you not? I confess, I told a lie. I remember it, though I've not used it since this power came to me. Red eyes met her. You may call me Scathach, my lord. Her hand rose, fingers outstretched. Damn it. Not her too. Sasuke clamped down on a sigh and clasped her palm. To a bright future. And so it was that the fate of Haven, no, the very fate of Mistral, changed forever. Little Willow scowled. You're the one my father hired to protect me? Well, he hated her already. Congratulations. She'd set a record. 3 months. That was how long it took to bring him to this moment. 3 days to meet Nicholas Knee and nurse young Cinder back to health. 3 weeks to earn their trust. 3 months to demonstrate his skills became the man's most trusted advisor and began training his daughter. To be fair, the last part really hadn't been intentional. Bad luck tended to follow him around like a lost puppy these days. But really, Kakashi had spent his time take a day or two to hunt down those awful witches who cast the Cinder out into the cold and arrange an accident on their part. What, he had his morals? No one would miss the 3 bodies frozen in the snow, and nothing of value was lost. Speaking of nothing, right, for your training, we'll start with your attitude. Kakashi smiled behind his mask. It was not a pleasant smile. That's got to go. Beside him, Cinder stomped a foot. He rounded on her instantly. Don't think I've forgotten you, Missy. You'll be doing 10 laps with Willow if you beat her. Well, I'll teach you that trick you've been asking about. 1,000 years of death, really? Golden eyes grew wide. Can I use it on the Schnee? Kakashi granted his ward a far more pleasant smile than he had her. Only if you win. Willow squawked. On me! What is it? It sounds awful. Cinder didn't respond. Instead, she took off across the track at a dead sprint. Willow balked and raced after her. If she won, she'd never let her live her down. She would never forget, and so she ran harder. That was the intent behind this, of course, and pit them against one another and see who triumphed. Perhaps it was petty of him to make them run laps. They were only children after all. Maybe he should be merciful. Nah, he crossed both arms before his wintry jacket, tucked his hands into his gloves, and chuckled. Brats deserved it for putting him through hell. If they survived this, then he'd see about giving them another test, one involving bells. Even after all these months, Kakashi was still a shinobi. His attention might appear to be focused upon his young wards at the moment, but he still sensed the moment someone took it into their head to approach him. He heard a door in the manor open behind him. Ears perked as the presence approached on his left flank. His shoulders tensed, only to fall slack as he recognized the faint aura signature. False alarm. There you are, my friend. Nicholas Schnee clapped him on the back with a mightful guffaw, nearly knocking the breath out of his lungs. Even at his age, the man hit like a monster. The wandering ninja smiled behind his mask. The meeting went well, I take it. Brilliant work as always. Your advice was spot on. Thick arms wrapped around him, drawing him into a brotherly embrace with a booming laugh. The council is all but eating out of my hands now, and I have you to thank of it. You've turned my company around. This is a debt I'll never be able to repay. It's nothing really. I'll not hear of it. I'm doubling your salary. With a rueful chuckle, the wayward ninja shook his head. I'd rather you pay me in advice. Nicholas followed his gaze, mirth fading somewhat as he beheld Willow struggle. She's doing poorly, is she? It's only her first day, Kakashi cautioned. She'll improve. It's her attitude that concerns me. Ahead of him, Cinder cried out in triumph as she pulled ahead of Willow in the final leg of their race. Unsurprising, the Harris had never run a day in her life. That would soon change. Stumbling, gasping, she collapsed at his feet, like little puffs of steam escaping from her mouth. Kakashi didn't miss the tears in her eyes. Nicholas drew her aside with a quick word, and he hoped the matter would be solved. It left him with the victor. Well done, he clapped twice. Where did you learn to run like that? She rasped, slamming to a halt before him. Couldn't survive otherwise. In truth, Cinder didn't fare much better than Willow, but she at least managed to remain standing, hands on her knees, chest heaving. She straightened under his praise. The sight brought back memories of a distant time when he'd been the greenhorn, a young boy running laps. Really, he was getting too old for this shit. But he was dead. Not yet. Cinder raised her gaze. Golden eyes burned bright on him, ready and eager to learn. Teach me. Kakashi's mouth quirked into a smile beneath the mask. Things were looking up. Sakura flew. She soared down through the clouds with a graceful backflips and skimmed the waves. Pale fingers ran across the clear waters of Menagerie as she flew, kicking up a salty spray in her wake. Shoals of startled fish scattered beneath the glassy surface of the sea. Alarmed by her presence, she laughed at them and shot past, skirting a reef, shot underwater, then reemerged a moment later, uncaring for the state of her clothes. A rush of hot air dried them instantly. All the while, green flames burned from her eyes. 3 months had been more than enough to understand her new gifts, if not necessarily control them. Sakura flittered down, ran across the water, and sprang back into the air with a laugh. By the sage, this felt good. Was this how Naruto felt when he flew? She could see the appeal, the might of the summer maiden, as the memories told, responded to her will. When she was happy and content, so was it. When her temper flared, so too did the storm. If there had been doubters before, then they had long since thrown in the towel. She still insisted she was the goddess, but by now it was more a habit than any else. Blasted old crone, she never wanted this, but damn if she wasn't going to use it. She was far from mastering it, but now she could at least fly without losing a foot. If only the boys could see her now. Elemental jutsu, who needed those? Thanks to this newfound power, she could sling fireballs with the best of them. Sakura knew she wasn't immortal, divine, or any such thing. She held no delusions of grandeur. It would have to be enough. Cresting another cloud bank, she gazed out at the ocean. Menagerie really was an island. There was a blip on the horizon, a dark speck growing steadily closer with each passing moment. A ship then. Menagerie had a fleet of fishing vessels, but the hour was late. A straggler then. Sakura squinted at it. No, scratch that. It was too large to be simply a trawler. A strange niggling sense of unease pricked at her breast as she gazed at it. Circling back to the shore, she landed with a rush of heat and air. Goddess! A boy hastened up to her as she glided to a halt. His arms flailed wildly, trying to catch her attention, as if his voice hadn't done that already. A ship! I saw a ship, one flying the colors of Atlas. So the rest of the island was aware. Good. The heck was an Atlas, though? And she vaguely remembered someone mentioning it once or twice, but the memory eluded her even as she reached for it. Instead, her eyes settled upon the says little pun the youngster standing before her. Tyrion was a simple lad, willing and eager to serve, almost fanatical in his devotion. She didn't even know where he had come from. He'd simply arrived at her doorstep one day and started worshipping her. Any attempts by the gods to drive him off only strengthened his resolve. They'd shoo him away one afternoon, only for him to return by nightfall. He didn't seem to mean any harm. Like everyone else, she'd simply given up trying to shoo him away. Perhaps that was for the best. Poor boy was just like Kali and Gira. He just needed some guidance, a firm hand to set him on the right path. Might as well be hers. No one else wanted to do it. Come along, Tyrion, she patted his head. We're about to have guests. His tail curled gleefully as he hasted it after her. They would not run from this. Run, girl, don't look back. The young girl did as she was told. She turned and fled. Tears burned in her eyes, golden braid flying before her face. She left her family to die. She bolted through the trees, through the town square, through the fire and flames, through the grim, through everything, heart hammering like a wild colt in her chest. She did as she was told. She ran and she ran and she ran. All around her, the shrieks of those fighting and dying filled her little ears. She didn't look back. She dare not, but she heard them all. She remembered them all. Her parents selling their lives dearly to hold the beast back. Her uncle shoving her out the door before an Ursa bit him in half, and still she ran. All the while, questions hammered through her young mind. Why was this happening? What had they done wrong? Why were they being punished? A man in a white mask had come to their town at sunset. He said they needed to be killed, made an example of. But why? Blinded by her tears, she made a mistake. Her foot caught on an upturned cobblestone and she fell. Her glasses flew from her face and struck the street, turning her vision blurry and red. She flailed from them in the muck and found the spectacles a moment later. They were cracked now. She could barely see. Nor did she see the shadow fall over her until it was too late. A dark shape loomed large over her. It grabbed her by the leg and dragged her down. The girl cried out, kicking and screaming for all she was worth. One of her shoes was flying off and struck the creature in the snout, startling it. Its grip on her ankle fell slack, and she used the chance to thrash her way free, for all the good that it did her. Because the beast gave chase. At this range, there could be no mistaking it, even with her ruined glasses. The Beowulf, the bibliophile in her mind babbled, and I thought at that, a deadly brute standing 10 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws and teeth to match. It was stronger than her, faster than her. She only made it a few yards before the beast caught up and rode her down to the ground. Pain slammed through her leg as its fangs found her leg. No, not like this. Her mind babbled as a piercing scream tore from her. I can't die here. I'm not meant to die here. Something snapped in her soul, and the girl flung her arms forward. The world answered. Rubble and debris stirred at her feet, and not understanding what was happening, the girl latched onto them with her mind. She pushed, and they flew forward, pelt the beast in the face like a storm. It chuffed in annoyance, then coughed when some of the debris lodged in its throat, forcing it to release her leg. She daren't look at the bloody and blurry mess it left behind. A massive paw crashed down on her chest, pitting her to the street. Red eyes bored into her, narrow and intent. This time it would not be denied. They both knew it. Tears pricked at her eyes again. Why did she have to die? What had she done wrong? Why? Slavering jaws yawned wide to bite down on her head and shoulders. Blood splattered her face, staining her cheek. There was no agony, no white light. Green eyes fluttered open in confusion, not comprehension. Was she dead? She still felt pain. Her leg ached in the worst of ways. Daddy had said you didn't feel pain when you were dead. So what then was this? She raised her gaze and found herself staring at a broad golden back. Hey, a rough, angry voice growled into the gloom. Why don't you pick on someone your own size? Through bleary eyes, she beheld her savior, a man. At least she assumed it was one through her ruined glasses. The beast had indeed drawn blood, but it wasn't hers. Its fangs found the man's shoulders, biting deeper into muscle and sinew. He'd thrown himself between them at the last moment. She realized leaping into its jaws to take the blow meant for her. Fresh tears pricked at the girl's eyes. Even she could see that the wound was a mortal one. A tiny hiccup pushed past her lips. He died for her. It was her fault, all her fault, and yet he did not perish. Don't worry, it's going to be all right. Burning red eyes, so unlike those of the Grim, peered over his shoulder to reassure her. Because his left hand clenched down, locking the Grim's jaws in place. The other swept upwards in a molten blur. I am here! Clenched knuckles barreled forward, and the Beowulf's head and the Beowulf's head and much of its upper torso simply ceased to exist. One punch, that was all it took. A single swing of his hand beheaded the creature, decimated it, and left its remains crumbling to the ground. Yet another leaped down from a rooftop at him. He caught it by the neck and crushed its throat. Its decaying corpse joined its comrade in death. A third sprang out of a ruined home, only to be kicked back into it, and tumbling through the street to crash into its real fellow, both without and within. Was this happening? Was this happening? Had help really come? A confident smile beamed back at her, brighter than the sun. You all right? He asked her. What's your name? The girl gulped. Glinda Goodwitch. Not a bad name. The golden hand came down to pat her head. Just sit tight. We'll handle this. She blinked. Oui. An angry blur of blue robes shot past, brandishing twin scythes with a fearless cry. With a flash of silver light, Grim died in droves. They were the lucky ones. Behind her, an army of golden warriors crashed down on the Grim, sighting through them like so much wheat. Glinda tried to speak. Tried to offer some retort. The shock of it all didn't let her. How? Touching a hand to her ruined leg, the golden man whispered a few words of comfort. Then she balked again as she witnessed another miracle. Flesh wound itself back together in no time at all, bone clicking and popping as joints realigned and flesh regrew. A massive one-eyed Ursa lumbered past the fountain square to face them as he stood, the very same that killed her uncle. She knew it by the blood on its jaws, its lonely eye glaring balefully into hers. You're the leader of this bunch, ain't ya? Good. I need to vent. Snatching up a blade from a fallen warrior, the golden man surged forward. He hacked through the beast's left leg, sending it crashing to the ground. It rounded on him with a massive roar, slamming twin paws down on the space he just vacated. Another flash of golden light, and it lost a paw in a shower of dark mist. Even down to the limbs, it kept coming. The golden man weaved through the storms and found his target. A glowing hand closed around the beast's mask. The creature screamed and slammed down to a knee. It doesn't feel too good now, does it? It swept this blindly at him. You're done killing people. His hand tightened around the beast's skull, etching fine fractures against the bone. No more, not a single soul. Golden fingers ground down and pulped the grim skull like a rotten apple. Once, twice, thrice, Glinda saw the scene replay itself time and time again in her mind's eye. Shards of white bone sprayed into the air. One of them whistled past her face and left a thin rent in her right cheek. She barely noticed, even when the beast collapsed at his feet and began to dissolve. She didn't take her eyes off it. Damn it, damn the Grim, damn them all. Anger reared its ugly head in Glinda's heart, and she leaped to her feet, driving her remaining shoe into its corpse. That's what you get. It serves you right. She kicked her heel against his ruined skull. Now you're dead. She kept at it until the demon dissolved. Once it had, she reared back and spat. Good riddance. With her anger gone, the rest of her emotions returned. All around her, the village burned. Even now, the last of the Grim were being mopped up by the golden swarm. But the damage was done. The dead were dead. They could not be revived. The survivors would rebuild, but it would never be the same. Not really, not truly. So few people. A tiny hiccup fled from her lips. Her family was avenged. Sure, that was good. That was a good thing. So why then? Why did she feel miserable? No. She didn't like this. She should have died with them. She had nothing. No one. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. And the golden man gazed down at her. No, not golden anymore. He'd released whatever strange spell he was doing. Gentle blue eyes met hers. A hand came down on her head, and she began to crack. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the gesture, his calloused hand caressing her head and tousling her hair the same way Papa always did in times of stress. Maybe it was his warm smile, the glimmer of understanding deep in his eyes. Her lower lip trembled, the fracture widened, her hands balled into helpless fists at her sides. She turned teary green eyes upon him. "What am I going to do now?" "Live," came the answer. It's what they would have wanted you to do." Little Glinda slammed her head into his legs and bawled. Previews. Glinda didn't let go of his hand even when they reached Vel. Of course, that meant Summer just had to latch onto the other. What was he, a chew toy? Such a daddy's girl. "Oh ho ho, look this way." Of course, Maria kept snapping pictures all the while. Naruto swore vengeance for this. Long bloody vengeance. Kakashi clapped slowly. "Well done, girls. You nearly caught me that time." Cinder flopped to the ground. "Hate you so much." Willow saw Schnee, and Schnee woman were determined. She was just a girl now. When she was older, she was going to court this man. This was a battle not even Nicholas could save him from. Cinder may have taken a place at his side, but she was younger. She didn't understand. She never would. Cinder stood first. Kakashi beamed at her. "That's my girl." Willow glowered at the younger girl in naked envy. "Might I have a word?" Sakura regarded the man with a cane. Her eyes burned. "Fascinating." He murmured the words softly. "You really are the one." "That's enough training for today. Return to your tent. You need your rest." Raven raised her arms. "I'm tired. Don't want to walk. Carry me." Sasuke sighed. Such a needy daughter. Upon leaving the beach, Sakura found her guards soon enough. "Goddess." The lead man saluted. "Atlas battleships." Sakura pursed her lip. "Well, let's go meet them." In short order, a squad of able-bodied men and women gathered at the beachhead with her. It was impossible to keep the children back by now. Any attempt to shoo them away would prove fruitless by now. All too soon, their guests arrived. The battleship, for it could be called nothing else, was a long and elegant thing, all gunmetal gray and white, which you would soon learn to be the colors of Atlas. Its curved hull plowed through the waters until finally it could come no closer for fear of beaching itself. Sakura dared to hope that it would be the end of it, that they would realize they weren't welcome here and simply turn back. It was not to be. As she looked on, a small boat was detached from the vessel's side. They were certainly a grim-looking bunch in all that armor. They advanced in lockstep, halted, and parted ranks, led by a balding man. Their leader took one look at her, or rather, her burning eyes, and scowled. "You, there!" A gloved finger jabbed at her. "Maiden, come with us. Atlas has need of you." Maiden. Sakura really did hate that title. It made her sound like a damsel in distress, some flowery girl waiting in a tower to be rescued by a prince, hardly an almighty spell-slinging warrior capable of raining fire down on her foes. Honestly, whoever coined that term wasn't right in the head. She'd love to have words with them. A knot of dread coiled in her stomach. "I will not." "You have no say in the matter," the captain snapped. "Your talents are wasted here with these animals. You will come with us, or you will be clapped in irons and dragged back to Atlas." Sakura's smile was just the wrong shade of vicious. Atlas, was it? "Get off my island." End of chapter 5.